Alright, hell yeah. So welcome back to another episode of Will It R1. So my boat has 3 chambers, so I'm able to have this chamber deflated and pulled up out of the water, you know what I mean? So there's a little riffle there, but essentially what we've made is similar dynamics, a tail that's bigger, and then and I can paddle this both ways. That's kind of the cool thing about R1. You can kind of practice 2 different things. So hell yeah, let's give this a paddle. Booyah. Alright, hell yeah. So I think this leaning paddle stroke is what you want to capitalize on, especially for boofs. And that's basically going to come from this back corner, you know what I mean? So this back corner should be able to leverage the boat, but then also probably have a third, you know, if this is its first position, second position, it should have a more third stable position just in case, just because you're probably going to be right at the tipping point. Right there. So what that allows you to do is like a boof stroke, where that allows that to bring that around. And even just doing what I just did, practicing a boof stroke from no momentum, is the shape that this makes. One, it has to be kind of rounded, so you can, when you do lean over onto this, it gets that portion of the boat out of the water. And you probably still need some tracking, or you're going to be forward. And now I've actually never boofed, like a serious boof in a kayak, but just from here, I noticed that I'm going to be more that way. So just setting up the boof if I was here, and then you could boof off something. But you know, I don't have this boat inflated all the way just because I'm deflating thwarts, so I'm probably losing quite a bit of performance. The floor is inflated. All right, hell yeah. Let's paddle around some more. Alright, I noticed right off the bat that when you do paddle, if you go this way, you do that boof, it'll give you the ability to track right off the bat. So, at least in this video, I think that's going to be the takeaway, the first takeaway, is that if I'm at a standstill, then I'm going to go here and do my boof stroke. Now I have to angle it appropriately, but still I think it's going to be better. The opposite is just the short paddle and pry your way, getting some sideways momentum, and then paddling your way. So what this allows me to do probably off a start, have the boat angled that way, and just go for that boof stroke, and then I can probably do it in 1-2. Here we go. Alright, hell yeah. And let's go back and forth just so we can compare the difference. So if I'm here and I need to come your way, I can still paddle forward. Yeah, so that's all we're mimicking. Is instead of paddling, you know, an arc, we're trying to do that maneuver just in two, you know, leaning strokes. Maybe you call it boost stroke. All right, hell yeah, so let's try it out. All right, and that's good practice. I do like that one because that first one got away from me. So it's a boost stroke, but then with a rudder. And I like stuff like that because I can be at the lake and, you know, I mean, work on something like that. So hell yeah. Let's get totally 90 just in case it runs away from me. All right, hell yeah, check the pockets. No cell phone. All right, booyah. All right. Now I think my boat is this boat is pretty well designed because the floor is a touch lower. But even from the dynamics that we're exploring, and even what I want this boat to do different, is to have a floor that can be lowered. And I can do that. I can build a little steel frame that's attached to the top of this boat, and then I can squeeze down, you know what I mean? Like I can push the floor down mechanically with a steel frame. So I should weld that up. But then what I would be able to, you know, then I would be able to see how much lowered floor you want and in what locations, because I could push it at different places. But right now, I'm having to lean all the way out onto this edge to get there. It would be the same dynamics though with the lowered floor, but it would be just in my normal seated position. So if I was seated right here and the floor was lowered, it would be the equivalent of being out here. So that's what I want to explore with the R1 dynamics, is because if I have to go to the very verge of me tipping outside the boat, like right here, just to get the boat up at that angle, it can be the equivalent of me just sitting right here, and that part of the boat could be tilted that same much. So if I just sat right here, it would be the equivalent of the boat being right there. And then that really gives you that adjustability. All right, let's practice some more. Always a good stroke to do is, if you're paddling backwards, be more pry oriented and then paddle. And that should be a separate tutorial. But yes, when paddling backwards, pry first, paddle second. All right, booyah. All right, hell yeah, let's get a little more speed. So if I want to go backwards instantly, right now, I want to pry to at least stop the boat, you know what I mean? And if you're more pry oriented, you can even take like two strokes. So that's where you want to be. And let's do that one right now. Because even if I'm coming towards you, I probably want to pry first, do 2 short strokes. You know what I mean? So again, if you're not able to take two short strokes in the direction you're wanting to go, because you're gonna get off angle, is because you need to pry more. So here we go. We're gonna do a pry, and then 1, 2. Hell yeah. And then what that allows you to do is give up on your paddle stroke, because if I'm here, it's like, nope, I gotta give up. All right, 1, 2. And that will really help dial in that balance point. All right, let's do some more booth, and then maybe fill these tubes up just a little bit. Hell Hell yeah, let's fill these tubes up. Alright, hell yeah. So all I did was inflate the floor to full pressure, and then I have a little seal, a rubber seal from NRS that I can put across that relief valve and pump it up just a little bit more. Now, it's at your own risk, you can damage your floor. But right now, this tube is just as soft, so now I'm just going to explore if the floor helps the dynamics of these boots. And just be like, how much that's the scientific method. How much does one thing affect? And then we're going to pump this boat up and see how much that affects. All right, so I do feel, unrelated, but I do feel the fact that this is not inflated over there, there is a little bit of extra, like when, you know, it's not catching drag. I don't notice it a ton though. That's definitely a fun stroke. And you know, half of it is like these dynamics not make a difference for, you know, trying to crush through a big wave, but just for all other aspects, you know, peeling out of eddies, which are all, you know, fundamentals of you know, even at the class 5 level, is efficiently paddling from a stop. Yes, this is kind of fascinating because I don't know if deflating this actually has allowed me to, or if I'm just focused on it more, but lean and then also pry at the same time. And it's just probably because leaning out here takes a lot of effort. I'm just going to paddle back and forth in this position. But the pry is the hardest thing from here. Alright, hell yeah. That's a really good workout. The main deal is finishing the pry under the rug, and there's no boat to hit my pry links, so it's just leaning out here paddling, but make sure to get that paddle under and pry underneath the rug. But it is a success tonight because that is a boof. You know what I mean? That's the elements, like at an elemental level, that is over here onto edge, paddling. I get a slight bump and a rise off of that front, and so that front is de-weighting. It's just difficult to finish it straight. If it's just one, hell yeah, you can just rotate the boat, especially out there. That's going to be more stable. But tonight, practicing paddling right here and then finishing with a pry. Hell yeah! So there it is. So that is a new paddle stroke that I don't think I've actually ever done before. I've always just swept it out. So yeah, let's set up the fundamentals of this. So we're into this. And you can feel that juice. All right, hell yeah. And so again, my proposition, been doing a lot of matrix algebra, so everything is elementary operations and propositions. Anyway, is that, again, I'm already at the, trying to do this just to feel that little bump. I'm already at my tipping point, basically. And that doesn't need to be the case. I could just be sitting here like normal, cool, the boat's tipped. I just need more boat over here. You know, something to have that third little punch out. So, hell yeah. So if I had, and I could design that myself, you know, there's a lot of options just for, you know, putting something right here, even if it's just one of my thwarts. But if that's the case, it will get in the way. So the bump out, you know, if I was paddling, I'm okay with about 4 inches, but that bump out probably wouldn't be more than here. But if I had that extra, you know, flotation in the water, that would cut in. So essentially, if you got real technical with it, you'd want a piece of flotation that was above the water when just in your neutral position, but then when I go to this position right here, it would catch and it would prevent this roll. So that would add that buoyancy. So I was trying to think of these designs last night, and it's kind of difficult to do just with paper, but that's exactly what I would want. It's just right there. And then sky's the limit to having this. Since this part of your boat gets rockered up, you can put a lot of extra. Like if this is the water line, I could have a bump out that's at this level, just a few inches above the water. It's not gonna catch. And I think that would be good. I like the diamond shaped design. What this diamond shaped design shows is that the bottom of the boat should be diamond shaped, because what it allows you to do is this pry is the most important part about R1ing. And even if I have my boat fully loaded in the Grand Canyon, fully loaded in the front, fully loaded in the rear, I was still able to do this. And right now I'm not getting taxed. Where, and that's where it got me, this whole series got me, you know, starting with a paddle cat, you know what I mean, just as a general idea of what a paddle cat is. You know, irregardless of the manufacturer, they're just difficult to pry. And R1 is a very pry-oriented sport. I want to do this and then start paddling that way. If I'm in a Class 5 eddy, I want to do that and then paddle that way. You know what I mean? So my litmus test is that a Class 5, from just my perspective, is like is an Olympic slalom boat. You know what I mean? And not necessarily Olympic slalom, but we're talking, you know, like Dane Jackson paddling the North Fork Championship on the Payette, which is a slalom course. That's a Class 5 kayaking slalom course, and you can't do that in R1 if your R1 is designed like if you're not able to, like, just turning, you know, turning is very important. That's all. And so it's not that paddle cats are inferior to round boats. In a lot of ways, they're hugely superior for just hopping in and making sure you can R1 down like any sort of river. But from these dynamics of being able to, it's very difficult to do this. Now in a paddle cat, hell yeah, you can do this all day. But it's just from here, I want to be like 4 inches off my hip and be able to rotate the boat. So that was the difficult skill, and this is a good skill to work on. It's where you, I call it like, I don't know, it's kind of the shape of a football. You know what I mean? You're kind of doing this rounded diagonal shape like a football, like that. You know what I mean? And so I'm just going to call it the football turn. But it's one where you do this, you slice back, and then you do a pry. So I'm pulling the nose. So it's a C stroke. It's a C stroke, but your paddle kind of does the shape of a football. And this is a huge litmus test for me, for my personal taste, is if I feel like this boat's going to be competent in like heavy water or bigger water, just because that is going to be like, that's going to how I'm going to be oriented this way, and then I'm going to drive that way. And it's a balance. You know, mainly if it's slow, even if I have this thing heavily loaded, cool, it's slow, but it still has proportional dynamics. So when I get here, now I'm able to motor that way. And so, but let's talk about all the basics of R1, because if I'm at a stop, to get to you, I'm going to be pry oriented, and I'm actually going to generate this speed and then turn towards you. So I think, and that's a fundamental of R1 rafting, from a round boat and taking that technology to a paddle cat. Paddle cat, if you're this way, you're going to be broaching 2 round surfaces through the water. Those round surfaces are almost like fins of a kayak, where, you know, someone's like, oh, you should put fins on this. But fundamentally, and I won't say, because that's the thing, there's no rules to this sport. So anything that you do is just physics and action. But for me, what I noticed about R1, it's a vector-oriented sport. So if I paddle this from a dead stop, if I paddle this way and then pry, those 2 vectors, one forward and then one pry, is going to have a resultant towards the camera. So here's forward, here's pry, and the resultant of those 2 is your direction. So if I'm in a paddle cat and I'm starting to paddle and I do this and this, in a paddle cat, the pry is just going to be pushing against water like you're pushing against fins. And so that's not gaining juice. Even if I was in a paddle cat at this angle, if I started to pry towards you, I'm just pushing those fins through the water. And so that's not an effective motion, where even in this boat, I've noticed it has rocker this way, and that provides a sloped angle. And that's the fundamental. It provides, when you're at a standstill, this pry, being able to pry this part of the boat at a slanted angle. You definitely want that rocker feel. And hell yeah. And again, even on a paddle cat, if your tube on the inside was just a little bit more tapered, instead of just being fully round, your 2 tubes, if the tube on the inside was just more tapered up, even if you did have a pocket, just a sloped angle will just really benefit this motion. All right, hell yeah, let's practice that boost stroke. All right, hell, I can get it the other direction, but not in front of the camera. I think I'm leaning. I need to crunch forward just a bit. So get this. So yeah, then crunch forward into it. Hell yeah. That feels really good. So I'm getting that angle, and then crunching forward allows me to get that pry. So see if we can capture that. Oh, hell yeah. So what I haven't done is paddled this other direction, because this makes the boat fundamentally different. Because now the back All right, hell yeah. It's gonna get dark, but I can still talk at the camera. I'm gonna switch tubes and then paddle the other direction on my strong side, just so I have something to compare to. Hell yeah. Now my boat is designed just a little bit different front and back too, because of the design of these thwarts, or just the design of the perimeter tubes. What I noticed right away, and I don't know if that's weird, because just instantly on this side I feel like the tendency just to sit more on this tube, and this is what I was talking about. This is a very stable spot to sit, and now the boat is already up at that angle that I want. So we're generating that just by sitting here. Now this brings up probably the most important aspect of trying to get these high performance things out of an R1 boat, is my foot is still braced in here. So you want your cockpit size to be, you know, kind of where you can hit probably all four corners, and still, like, this is going to be the farthest out you're going to be, but I still have feet connected in there. And so that kind of determines, from my perspective, the shape you want from the boat. And so let's try to do this through this road. But I am face this way so that the pry is a little harder. Yeah. So sure, I'm able to get the boat up here, but from this position, it's even harder to pry underneath the rug. But it can be done. So let's try to go the other way just to show you, see if I can get this pry dialed in. So I always finish under the rug. If your pry is not strong, get it into position, delay it, and then pry. All right, this brings up the other aspect of what I would like in an R1 boat. Is like, this is my functional position to be, but I have no brace. You know what I mean? Like, if this is where my foot's locked in, you know, I'm already crunched in that by going into the water, I guess, no, there's physics there. Like, if I feel that slipping, I can dive into the water, but it's already such a high position. And so that's going to be the high brace where your paddle goes like this. I would probably take my hand off the T-grip and do that. Because, yeah, that makes sense. There's no kayaker braces like this. To do the high brace, you have to have your hand like kayak. I've never even practiced that, and I never even realized that, because I've never even tried the high brace, just because you got to switch your hand up. And so that's interesting. That might bring up the idea that you maybe want an Omni handle up here to where you can still feel like you can drive this way, but then instantly go from here to grip like this part. Oh, hell yeah. To do that high brace. These aren't the friendliest creatures, but I dig it. They just get so used to people out here, it makes them, it's kind of nice. Alright, hell yeah. Yeah, I think that's where we're going to be spending the rest of this dark night. You can't see anything anyway. And yeah, this is the perfect place to practice the brace. Hell yeah, I've never even practiced that. So it is something you could get good at. But you would have to take your hand and do this. Alright, hell yeah. Alright, hell yeah. So if, you know, it's like Murphy's Law, if something can happen, it will. So when my foot was in that position, it kicked up into the perimeter line that goes across my thwart. And so that's just something I've always, so that there you go. So if that foot's going to go into that when I do that aggressive maneuver, it's going to happen again. So having that perimeter line underneath your seat is the safest place for it. I just switched my boat around so it's just in that location. Alright, hell yeah. I'm gonna paddle and talk and see if we can come up with anything more. Alright, I don't know if I'm just getting it, but that feels a lot better on this side. I feel like I have more balance point over here. So that shows that this boot stroke is a lot easier. And the take home from tonight is when practicing your boot stroke just around the lake, is to make sure you end it with that pry and getting that going in the right direction. All right, hell yeah, that's all for this evening. I'm gonna go paddle around the lake and work on my offside. That is something where if you want to practice one skill, you know, if you're not paddling every day, and this is myself, I don't paddle every day, I don't have whitewater. I can get to whitewater once every 2 weeks, and sometimes I just do a wave or something, just because I don't have a lot of people to paddle with or whatever. But doesn't mean I can't paddle every day. Most people have lakes. So that is one of my biggest drives, is to be like, if you can make a boat that's still functional, like I take this thing down the Grand Canyon and it's magical, quote unquote magical, from the place that I can take it to the lake, and I'm always having a fun time at the lake. I can't say that with other boats. If you saw me paddling other boats on this lake, you know, and that's where, again, like I'm sure I've already gotten my first dislike on this series of being like, because the only way that you can test dynamics is taking other people's products and testing them, you know what I mean? And if you say those products didn't work for this type of physics, then it might seem like, you know what I mean, and just in general, you know what I mean, if people take that the wrong way or whatever, it could change purchasing decisions in the short run. You know what I mean, where people are just like, oh yeah, I guess I'm not going to buy that boat. So I'm really going to stay away from you should buy this, you shouldn't buy that, and more just talking about the physics. But I get that those, you know, anytime you're talking about the physics of something, that goes into people's purchasing decisions. That's the biggest drive, typically, especially in a sport that's dominated by just like, oh, go have fun. But what I'm after is like, hey, we're using this as a tool to do something at a high level. And if the tool is better, then, I mean, because people, you could also think of it from the risk aspect. People are risking their lives and not just, you know, quote unquote having fun out there. They're pushing the limits of something, and if a better product can be made, and that's my goal, is to not have the last 2 decades look like, you know what I mean, the last 2 decades. So just in the last few years, I would say 5 years, yeah, I mean, there has been huge improvements. But still, none of those improvements probably were, well, just the last year or two, you know what I mean, from these 2 companies, for sure, RMR making the Thundercloud. But that's the biggest thing, because I'm going to be talking about how the Fat Cat, you know what I mean, I'm not going to take it to the lake, you know, so that's the one that's probably going to get me dislikes, and that's the elephant in the room. The other one was the Air Tributary, but really no one's, you know, seeking that out as an R1, but someone in the R1 community paddles the Air Tributary, and I made a video of just like, oh man, I'm just not going to paddle this around the lake, it's heavy, it doesn't feel like it has the dynamics. But if you're crushing through waves, you know what I mean, like that's the thing, is like that's a log is going to be the best thing sometimes to get down a class 5 environment. If you take a log to the lake, I'm going to have no fun on a log. So I'm just personally after something in between, and in that there's a lot of dynamics, you know what I mean? Because if you look at the comparison of a whitewater kayak, I guess it would be comparing like a whitewater kayak going down the Stikine to a creature craft going down the Stikine. Creature crafts are notorious for not having functionality. I mean, not that they couldn't have it. I think all the things that I've been talking about in this series could help the design of a creature craft, because a creature craft is also a paddle cat, basically. And even though paddle cats have been crushing like the big water class 5 environment for years, still you can make small adjustments to make that paddle cat more like R1ing. It's like, I'm not interested in paddle catting because there's nowhere to jump to. I think paddle catting, from my perspective, I would want one that's, I mean, we're talking, catarafting. Traditional catarafting is really difficult to jump around when you have all that frame and all these holes to slip into. But my design on a cataraft would be something that you can jump to, have multiple edges, and then have rotational. Catarafts, you have plenty of rotational speed. So that's what I talked about in the last video, is your physics parameters are like, I only have so much output with my hands, you know, and arms for whatever tool you're using, oars or paddles, and rotational speed, you know, in both directions have to not feel like weightlifting, and in an oar boat it's not, you know what I mean? So if I'm in an oar boat and I generate this much rotation in an R1, and think about it, it doesn't matter whether you're in a heavily loaded oar boat or just a light oar boat, still for about the same purchase you're getting the dynamics on a ratio that's mentally satisfying or whatever, you know what I mean? That's not very physics quantitative, but yeah, same thing. When you R1, if I go for that pry, I want that pry to turn the boat rotationally, whether it's heavily loaded or not. We've talked about how even if the boat's heavily loaded, it's still going to have the same dynamics based on what it looks like underneath. So for sure, paddle cats and catarafts probably could benefit from, you know, I guess they're no longer paddle cats if you have a full floor that pushes in. You know, I mean, then it's just a raft. But even with the paddle cat, your round tubes, you could design those to just be flush and flat, and even slightly like have a, I mean, a kayak has a flat spot and then probably rounded up tubes. But all that would require, you know, I mean, it's really difficult to get that from inflatables. But any of these dynamics can be explored from, you know, like a rotomolded perspective, even though any modifications are just hella expensive, because how are you gonna make something just overnight, and it requires so much effort, and but still you can still feel the dynamics even if your prototype is heavy. So that's what we've realized, is that surface tension causes more rotational drag than just something that doesn't have a lot of rotational drag that's heavily loaded. All right, so sweet. I just wanted to, I do enjoy this figuring out the dynamics of rafts, and so we'll continuing on, and hit me up, because you know, this is what I have to paddle. I have a lake, and if anybody wants me to make videos on like, hey, try this, I can try that. So hell yeah, thanks for joining me, and that's a video. Driven this way. Oh. Oh, that sucks. Oh, I hit a rock. That's so interesting. So next time I'm at the surf waves, I'm actually gonna start wearing a back brace, because that is one of the injuries you can get R1 boating so easily, is landing on your back into rocks. Now with the life jacket, that does provide a little bit of protection, but I've hit my lower hips and stuff. All right, hell yeah. So this draw stroke is the only juice that you have. But again, drawing the boat, what happens is you're lowering this tube, and it's sucking down. So it's not the most efficient way. Let me get this bag of water in with the rest of our light. Hardly have any light left, that's all right. All right, hell yeah, got a substantial amount of water. Shoot. Damn, I don't have enough light for this. I need to get that water. I need to get this water right here. so I think I have too much water. Yeah, I need this black strap for this one. Hell yeah. Well, black one. Right, hell yeah. So hopefully we can get that to chill out right there. I think we can. All right, let's see if you can get an inner tube to R1. You know, I'll probably try to. If this goes, I'll make this video for in the light. All right, hell yeah. Now you can use that, like that actually balances it out. So when I do come towards you, we talked about how that is a line of mass. I can get that line of mass to come towards your direction. It's not staying where I want it. Alright, so the principles are there. Because we have a line of mass, that is the line that wants to, if I put a driving force behind it, it builds up some plow, you know, kind of plows through. But this thing has too much, it has zero rotational drag. And so the pry is just too easy. Well, actually, and even the pry actually doesn't even have anything to pry against. So let's see if, yeah, the pry right now actually feels harder than it should. This is real interesting because the drag on here feels way more, I mean the rotational drag. I filled that water up real good. And the rotational drag is, it's unstable, where it takes a lot of effort to start that rotational drag, but once it does, there's nothing to stop it. There's no part of the boat that's dynamic to cause a glide. All right, we'll go back and forth, and that's probably a video.